everybody, and welcome back to the Zodcast. Today is October 10th, and I want everybody to be looking out for the next upload from the Zodiac Killer channel, because that will be an interview with yours truly with host Ned DeHaan for the Zodiac Killer channel. Of course, that's Steve and Jack over there, and appreciate those guys, and of course Ned as well for hosting that show for them and having me on. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I think it's one of the better ones I've ever done, I hope. Of course, I haven't seen the finished product, but I think it's going to turn out great. Anyway, I was asked by a couple of people to weigh in on the whole Gary Francis post as a Zodiac Killer suspect, since that has been the hot topic lately. Of course, he was put forward by a group of 40 detectives, I think they're calling it, but I'll get to Gary Francis' post here in a little bit. But I first wanted to read this comment from Kyle Milner, and it says, Drew, the only real debate is if Arthur Lee Allen was in on it with Cheney and in what capacity. And I think Cheney deep down wanted to be fingered as the Zodiac, but after his death. I watched his name was Arthur Lee Allen, and when Cheney tells the stamp story, I literally spit my coffee out. I quickly found your channel after that. Really appreciate that, Kyle, and of course I totally 100% agree with you. This is all for me about finding out the dynamic between Cheney and Allen, because there's really nowhere else to there's just nothing else plausible for me. I've seen enough between Cheney and Allen to tell you that these two guys are absolutely the genesis of the Zodiac. The letter writers is a tandem, with Allen mailing the letters and Cheney coming up with the whole idea and executing the murders. I mean, no pun intended with that word, but I think I think Cheney made good on it. I think Cheney was the attacker, and I think Allen had some input on the letter writing. And Allen may or may not have even known Cheney was going to go make good on the attacks. He could have talked him into, hey, let's just take credit for this stuff, and you'll get some attention. Such as when John Lynch interviewed Arthur Lee Allen so quickly after the Lake Berryessa attack. I think it was like 10 days or so after Lake Berryessa, and of course Allen was told the police that he had bloody knives in his trunk. No one ever found those bloody knives, by the way. That's not true. It's Allen said that he had bloody knives in his car that day, so they just took it for granted. And of course, Allen said he was going to go down to Salt Point. He went down to Salt Point Ranch, but was going to go to Berryessa that day. He was expecting the police. I've always said that. But I appreciate that comment from Kyle. And here's another one from Kyle. He said, I literally paused the movie, I think he's talking about the Zodiac movie, and told my girlfriend that Cheney was the killer, and she was blown away after I basically told her Drew's core theory. Appreciate that one as well, Kyle. And of course, my core theory is that Donald Lee Cheney was the creator of the Zodiac, or call it the Zodiac persona, and somehow enlisted Arthur Lee Allen as a patsy, or a willing patsy, to take place in that. Of course, Arthur Lee Allen is still today the top suspect in the Zodiac crimes. And I hate to say it, he's even higher up than Gary Francis Poste as the prime suspect in the Zodiac crimes. And my theory is that his friend that brought him forward as a suspect in July of 1971 is actually the creator of the Zodiac, and not Arthur Lee Allen. I think Don Cheney created all this and introduced his friend as a suspect as a way of vicariously living the crimes again that he created. I mean, for attention. And that all ties back to Kyle's first comment about how he felt that Don Cheney wanted to be fingered after death for the crimes. And that would just make sense. He wanted the glory for what he created. And I go back to the interview that Tom Voight did with Don Cheney in 2000, when Voight's asking him some very pointed questions about Arthur Lee Allen being guilty. And he said, do you remember Arthur Lee Allen liking cryptograms or puzzles or things like that? Of course, talking about the Zodiac ciphers. And Cheney doesn't take the bait. He says, no, I don't remember Arthur Lee Allen being into cryptograms or things like that. And I think that's because Don created that, and it's something he wanted to save for himself, or the coming up with that himself. And he didn't want to give all that to Arthur Lee Allen. Of course, I believe he didn't want Arthur Lee Allen to go all the way down for the crimes. And that would have been hard to do anyway, because remember, Don Cheney would have had to have been the lead witness there, and a cross-examiner defending Arthur Lee Allen could have really hurt Cheney in a lot of ways. First, because Cheney changed his first timeline, moving it back a year from New Year's Day 68 to 69. But anyway, they could have had a field day with Cheney there, and the fact the story was changing depending on when that trial would have taken place. But I really think that's why Cheney did not want to give Allen credit for that, because he came up with the ciphers, of course. And you know my belief, I think he was inspired by Earl Price's ciphers from the Bakersfield Californian. But also, Voight asked him, did he like the opera or things like the opera, like the Mikado? And Cheney said not that he remembered. He liked these other kind of things like Mad Magazine and stuff like that. But Cheney says, I did at the time, meaning he liked opera. He liked something like the Mikado. Cheney didn't specifically say the Mikado, but he said he liked things like that, meaning opera. So it's like that's part of him or what he liked, and he didn't want to give that to Allen, even in an interview with Tom Voight. So it just plays into that. I know some people say, well, he didn't want to, say all that about Allen because he's just being truthful. Trust me, Don Cheney's not being truthful. There's so many holes in his story that it's ridiculous, and I've pointed all those out before. And this whole thing of, Cheney inserting himself into the case when he brought Arthur Lee Allen forward in July of 71 does remind me of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, who on a later anniversary, I believe, of his first crime. I can't remember if it was the 10 or 15 year anniversary. I'm not an expert of that crime, but I know it somewhat. But on that 10 or 15 year anniversary of the crime, he sent in stuff to the media and the police, and that's what led to his undoing, when they have the computer disk that found the letter where he was the head of his church group, and that's how they tracked him down and caught him. But he didn't want to get caught, but he definitely wanted to take a victory lap on that, 10 or 15 anniversary, whatever it was, of that first murder of his. He felt proud of it and wanted to kind of claim credit for it without getting caught. And that's what he was doing, sending that stuff into the news stations and the police. So that's what it makes me think of, although I think Don Cheney was a lot more intelligent and a lot more lucky than Dennis Rader. And the next comment on the screen is going to lead me into the discussion about Gary Poste. And I think at least 80% of the people doing videos on this guy are calling him Posty. I'm pretty sure the E is silent, but I'm not going to swear to it. But Ned's going with Post, so I'm going to go with Post. Definitely going to believe the E is silent, so I'm going to call him Gary Poste. And this is from Walter, who's been around forever. Walter, will we ever know your real name? But I know you get around to all these Zodiac videos, but you've been following me for a long time, and I really appreciate that. But Walter says, Drew, I don't see a painter doing much drafting or access to a light table. I took drafting in high school as an elective. Wasn't easy. So thank you for the comment, Walter. I agree with that, because I was talking about, I think it was Morford's suspect, or any other suspect for that matter. Of course, I have mine. That is Donald Lee Cheney, and he could draft. But when you look at all the Zodiac letters and correspondence, like I've said, it's just, to me, it's a given that he could draft. He was good with a pen. He could hide his handwriting. That's why he didn't need to use a typewriter. But that is true, Walter. Appreciate the comment. And that's going to lead me into talking about Gary Poste, or Gary Francis Poste is his full name, and that's the new suspect brought forward in the media lately that was talked about with a team of 40 investigator detectives or ex-law enforcement, military, whatever they are. And I'm not going to trash this guy. There's no need to. That's already been done. But let's just talk about him on the merits. Like Walter says, I already don't like him as a suspect unless you can show me where he had some form of drafting experience, number one. And then, of course, where did this guy ever learn advanced mathematics? And you really had to. The more, if you watch Dave Aranchek's videos about how they broke the 340 and how much more complex it was, and the things he did to throw off code breakers in there, the two diagonal sections and stuff. And I don't know, I never go near the ciphers to try to claim that Don Cheney pops out in the ciphers or any of that kind of stuff. I know I talked about the dates going backwards and stuff about Brian Hartnell's car door, and I'll speculate on some things like that, but I've never come out and said, there's his name in the middle of the cipher. I've never done that, because there's guys as smart as those three guys are that broke that. I'm going to leave it to them. So, and I'll get to that in a little bit about where Dave Ranchek weighed in on this whole Gary Poste thing, because they were the people that brought forward Poste as a suspect are claiming that his name, of course, is in the ciphers. I mean, I automatically lose credibility on anybody claiming that the name of the suspect is in the cipher, because I don't think Zodiac would have done that. And if he did, it would have probably be impossible to get out. Of course, we hope it's in that my name is cipher, but I just don't think it is. But every time somebody has their suspect in the cipher. It looks like they're just trying too hard to me, and that makes me think of Harvey Hines and, of course, with Larry Kane. It's just too desperate. I mean, put out the circumstantial evidence you have, but don't try to push it so hard that you claim it's in a cipher. And if you do, run it by guys like Dave Aranchek, like a group like this guy group that's putting Gary Francis Poste together out there as a Zodiac killer suspect. Run it by them. I mean, if you got Dave Aranchek or Jarl Van Eck or Sam Blake or that any of those three guys or all three of them, just say, yeah, we studied this and it looks like this is the guy's name popping out, and we don't see this happening randomly or by chance. You got a huge wave behind you, but of course they're not going to do that because it's nonsense. They don't want those guys doing that because of course they're going to shred it, and rightfully so, because it's not there. That's why I never go towards that with Cheney or anything else. I put out there what I know. He went to school with Paul Avery, which is stunning in 53. He has his grandfather's first cousin last name was Paradise with the weird spelling. That's facts. So I can put that out there because I can back it up, but I'm never going to claim this weird, finding the name in the cipher stuff. I'm just not. All right, so I know I'm digressing, but anyway, back to Post. Here's this thing that was on the internet, and this is just going by his, some of his stats. Weight 175. Of course, he was older here. I think he was 78 years old, and this was from an arrest. He got arrested fairly shortly before his death, I believe. But this has him at 6 feet, which is a good height for Zodiac. That's Cheney's height, so I'd say that's in his favor as far as I'm concerned. It says weight 175. That's kind of light to be the Zodiac. Of course, he's older here. He could have weighed more back during the crimes, and of course, we know what he weighed because Zodiac was described as stocky. Of course, they had the shoe imprint from Lake Berryessa, which said that the assailant would have been around 225. But I don't know what Gary Post weighed at the time of the Zodiac crimes. I don't. Here's I believe a mug shot from his arrest before he died, and I believe the arrest involved some kind of domestic violence or something with his wife. And I will be the first to admit I am not an expert on this guy. I'm just kind of going through some of the basics I found out about. Been kind of busy, but I definitely wanted to do something on him. But I know one of the first things they put out there that at least I heard were the fact that Gary Post had some surgical scars, I think from a brain surgery, and those were similar to the Zodiac Presidio sketch as you're seeing on the screen there. And I thought that was laughable. And I thought, I'd never heard of the Zodiac having any scars other than some of the fingerprints that were taken showed a scar on one of the Zodiac's hands, and I think that came up in the whole Gary Stewart, Earl Van Best deal, where they claimed that Earl Van Best or Gary Stewart claimed that his father, Earl Van Best Jr., had a scar on one of his hands that matched up to one of the Zodiac fingerprints, and I think it turned out to not even be the right hand. Of course, everything went wrong for Gary Stewart, especially when he put forth his father's handwriting, and it turned out to be the minister who married him and his mom or whoever. So a lot of people are kind of linking this to Gary Stewart and Earl Van Best Jr. as far as how much evidence he has as far as their suspects being the Zodiac. But anyway, I've never heard of those being scars, and I think those were just age lines that the person doing the composite was trying to show some age there. They weren't scars, so you're already starting off pretty weak. If you have something really good, let's say if these guys did have DNA or it was forthcoming and they knew it, you don't have to put something as silly as these forehead scars. It's ridiculous. And then I know everybody's lampooned this whole deal about the block of wood that shows the Zodiac from the Lake Berryessa attack where he's wearing the hood, and they say that this is a selfie of him in the hood that got taken from a photo lab or something, and the picture caught this selfie from 1980. I mean, did he keep the hood for 11 years and it showed up on this block of wood? I mean, that's hard it's hard to absorb that and not laugh. I'm sorry. I know some people got upset when Ned went after him hard, and a few other people, but that is hysterical. Come on. the selfie in the wood. I mean, if you got something great on your suspect, you don't have to go as far as the selfie in the wood. I mean, that's even the casual observer that doesn't follow Zodiac's going to laugh at that. I mean, it's from 1980. It caught the selfie. He's wearing the hood, and he's got That's their evidence. I mean, that's pretty pathetic, but I couldn't help but go there about the selfie in the wood. I mean, that's gonna last for years. I think, who was it? It was Ross from Planet X Film said, "In the shadow of the stump" or something like that on Ned's channel. That was a good one, Ross. I meant to Instagram you and tell you that. But anyway, just looking at pictures of him, and that one I just showed where he was next to the Lake Berryessa sketch. He doesn't, that they say that photo where he's standing is from '74. He doesn't look very stocky to me. I wouldn't say he looks skinny, but he doesn't look particularly stocky. He definitely doesn't look barrel chested. Can't really tell if he had a widow's peak in '69, but looking at these pictures they have, it doesn't look like he had hair like that. Of course, he kind of does look like the sketch when he's older, and that doesn't mean much. What did he look like when the sketch was originally done, number one? And then number two, wasn't everybody convinced Ross Sullivan looked exactly like the sketch? But people keep going on about how much this guy looks like it. Come on, give me a break. And here's the 1974 photo. Of course, these investigators, led by Thomas Colbert, and we'll talk more about him. The picture they put forward of Gary Francis Poste. And he's walking in snow in this picture, so he might be wearing a thicker shirt or whatnot, but he doesn't look particularly stocky or barrel-chested in this photograph at all. And of course, they're calling him Z. I mean, that's pretty pretentious to call him Z already, but every time they refer to the guy, they're calling him Z. So they're getting pretty far out in front of themselves. And they also claim there's more evidence, or maybe one of the murder weapons way up in the mountains or something, and they can't get to it because they're all over 50 years old. That's pretty bad for us people over 50 that none of us can get up into the mountains and find the murder weapon of the Zodiac killer. I mean, if they knew a murder weapon that was possibly used by the Zodiac was up in some mountains, I don't care how long it takes to get there. You're going to get there and find it. I don't care who you are. So that's another kind of a funny claim that these guys are doing. Here's another picture of Post here on the left. I think he's wearing a Minnesota Vikings hat. And, to me, he just looks like just another old guy that let out his life. But one thing that I thought was real interesting was this comment, and this was from YouTube. And I saw this somewhere else on the internet. It says, the top comment on that YouTube video now claims that Gary Poste suggested himself as a possible Zodiac on Reddit. A user named Gary Poste made a comment in 2017 suggesting the name Gary Francis Poste. Makes you wonder, since it was only a few months before his death. What is their source on this question mark? If that post and username ever existed, they're both deleted now. No user of that name, no search results for the name before today. Where did they get that info? And I saw that as well. That'd be interesting that someone put that out there 3 years ago. Of course, that wouldn't make Gary Francis Poste any more likely to be the Zodiac or not the Zodiac, but it would be interesting if his name was being floated out there by either himself or someone else as early as 2017 on the message boards. And I'm sure somebody else out there is going to know more than me about that, but I thought that was interesting. So I want to go back around to Dave Aranchek. I'm giving you a lot of attention today, Dave. And, I thought about the whole, like I said about the ciphers. Of course, you'd want to run this by these guys because these guys are cipher experts. And think about it. When they broke the 340, there was a lot of people with egg in their face that said they had solved that cipher. Well, I know my solution's the right one. Well, it wasn't. The FBI confirmed the solution by these three guys, so they've got all the credit in the world. So why wouldn't you get in front of them? Of course they didn't, because they know it's nonsense, like I said. But I wanted to know if Dave Aranchek had weighed in on this at all. And this will tell you everything, and this is from his Twitter. I don't have a Twitter account, so I have to just go in and see some of the things, but I don't follow every tweet because I don't have an account there. But I saw where Aranchek put this out. It said, great thread with some more background on the Zodiac story. And then I saw that he had retweeted Billy Jensen. And I thought that was interesting, and I'll explain this. It's because Billy Jensen is the one who did a TV show with a guy named Thomas Colbert, who was the lead guy of this team of detectives that brought forward, or investigators, whatever he calls it, about Gary Francis Poste. Well, of course, as a D.B. Cooper researcher as well, I know who Thomas Colbert was because he put forward a D.B. Cooper suspect years ago named Robert Wesley Rackstraw. Of course, it went nowhere. Rackstraw was actually looked at as a DB Cooper suspect in the earlier days. I think in the late 70s, around 78. He was ruled out by the FBI as a DB Cooper suspect. And he wasn't a terrible suspect, but the way that Colbert and his team went about pushing Rackstraw as a suspect was just like they're doing with Gary Francis Poste. And it's kind of pathetic. And Colbert would do things like, he first of all he bought dbcooper.com, which I thought that was smart to scoop that up as the website. He probably got it fairly cheap. Wish I had bought that, but I definitely didn't have the money. But that was smart. But anyway, that was his whole website for his book about Robert Wesley Rackstraw being DB Cooper. Book was called The Last Master Outlaw. But here's just an example. He had a quote from Bill Mitchell, who was a witness to DB Cooper that was on the plane, and it says, the lead part of the article on his website said, "The man who fingered DB Cooper." And then you read the article about Bill Mitchell, and it basically says that, he can't remember what Cooper looked like. It's been too many years, and that, he looked at pictures of Rackstraw, and it didn't, he couldn't remember. He basically said nothing about, he definitely didn't finger the guy. So it was really pretentious, just like these guys calling Gary Poste Z. And, it was the same antics. But anyway, they did a documentary for the History Channel, which I think is where these guys are going with this whole Gary Poste thing. But it's kind of a weird way to go about it. You'd rather want your book already written or something when you have that big media blast, so then they can go find the book. And if people thought that was the Zodiac, maybe sell some books or whatever. But with the DB Cooper suspect, these guys had a History Channel documentary. Of course, that was promoting the book and whatever they got out of the documentary. But it was produced by History Channel, and they thought maybe these guys really did solve DB Cooper. But the reason I'm bringing it up is the person they had on was a true crime writer named Billy Jensen, who Dave Aranchik is retweeting here, and then and retired FBI guy, I believe his name was Tom Fuentes, and those two guys were going to kind of evaluate this cold case team's evidence for Robert Rackstraw being DB Cooper. And at the end of the show, you almost feel sorry for Thomas Colbert, because both Billy Jensen and Tom Fuentes, the FBI agent, basically says, we haven't seen anything compelling here. In fact, they went further than that and said, we don't believe that Robert Rackstraw was DB Cooper. And so you kind of start feeling sorry for Thomas Colbert, because he had so much invested in it. And, I'm sure he paid all these guys, all these investigators, just like he's doing with the Zodiac thing. So when, I heard about this whole thing from my friend, Darren Schaefer, who has a podcast called The Cooper Vortex, which is fantastic if you like the DB Cooper case. If you haven't heard of that podcast, check it out. It's the only thing going for a DB Cooper podcast. It's the greatest. And he sent me a text saying, it looks like Colbert has now solved the Zodiac case or something like that, with this laughing emoji. So I knew it was already bunk if Colbert was involved. So I wasn't too worried, and I wouldn't have been worried anyway. But so Billy Jensen was being in that. And when I saw Dave Aranchik retweeting Billy Jensen, I was pretty sure that he wasn't signing on to any of this. So the tweet from Billy Jensen reads, "A note on this Zodiac Killer news. In 2015, I was called upon by a team of producers for the History Channel to pressure test a suspect in the DB Cooper case that a group of investigators had zeroed in on. They paired me with Tom Fuentes, former assistant director of the FBI." Of course, that's the two guys I just mentioned that were part of that. And I don't have that tweet up, but Jensen basically went on to say, take anything these guys say with a grain of salt, that he really didn't like their methods. So that wasn't good for them at all that he did that. And then, of course, here's Aranchik also retweeted the FBI, saying that the case is still open, it's not solved, because I'm sure Dave Aranchik got a lot of emails and probably a lot of phone calls about, hey, did you hear the news? Did you hear the news? And I'm sure he was skeptical right out of the gate. So when you don't have a guy like him behind you, you're already looking weak, and you should already vet things, especially if you're going to go to the ciphers and not go through a guy like him, and to say, hey, can you at least look at this and give us your opinion? And you got to live with it, because these guys are experts. Dave Aranchik is an expert on the Zodiac ciphers, solved the 340 with his team, so just go through them. I mean, that's why I never go near that stuff, or you look so desperate to try to be right and to go towards the ciphers. Kind of like these guys, not only did they go for the ciphers, but they went for the stump. They went for the ciphers and the stump and the scars that never existed on the Zodiac. So it's weak. If you have something solid, you got DNA, you've got a fingerprint match or something, or anything like that, or just some, or better solid circumstantial evidence. You don't go there. It's like, I know I've thrown some things out with Cheney here and there that might have been interesting, but I never said this absolutely proves it's him or not, especially when you're doing a podcast or something and you want new material or things you found and you're just discussing it. But, I stand by everything in my book and everything I've ever found, and I can totally back it up. But I never try to say I saw the Zodiac's image in a block of wood. And here's a picture. This is Thomas Colbert. He doesn't seem like a bad guy. I don't know him, never talked to him. I don't think Rackstraw is actually a terrible D.B. Cooper suspect. Of course, my suspect is Ted Burdett Braden, who was also a Vietnam veteran like Robert Rackstraw was. But, I saw they would do some disingenuous things. And he also tried to claim that Rackstraw's name was found in codes out of 2 of the D.B. Cooper letters, which Thomas Colbert did get released by the Freedom of Information Act. So I give him credit. He got what I call D.B. Cooper letter 5 and 6 released. And if you know my story about Paratrooper of Fortune, my book, and Ted Braden, one of the best things going for Braden is what I call D.B. Cooper letter number 6, because it's got all the hallmarks of Ted Braden in it. But they tried to claim that Rackstraw was in Special Forces. He was not. Robert Rackstraw was never a member of Special Forces in Vietnam. He was a helicopter pilot, pretty good one, kind of a crude guy, which doesn't line up with D.B. Cooper. But there was several problems with Robert Rackstraw's Cooper. One was his age. He was 28 at the time of the Cooper skyjacking. Every witness to Cooper said he was a middle age. It's just kind of the thing playing out. I think Colbert's a media hound. And, at the end of that whole thing, there's a picture of Robert Rackstraw, also went by the name Airborne Bob. And I actually know his former pot dealer, and some of you D.B. Cooper guys know who that is. And the guy, and I won't mention his name, but he became a D.B. Cooper aficionado off of knowing Robert Rackstraw. And he says that Robert Rackstraw definitely was not D.B. Cooper. And like I said, he knew him pretty well. He used to sell him pot way back in the day, and thought that was interesting. But anyway, the whole thing with Rackstraw went nowhere, and I don't think the whole thing with Gary Poste is going anywhere. So that's kind of the story on Colbert and the whole Gary Poste thing. In my opinion, I mean, could that guy, just because these guys got it wrong with D.B. Cooper, doesn't mean they got it wrong with Gary Poste. No, Gary Poste still could be the Zodiac, and maybe these just guys lucked into something and found them. But I just don't think so, because their methods are so bad, and you could tell they just at one point decided to come out with it all, and it was weak. So it's already dying down. This thing was big last week when they got it into the media, and it's already died down. I mean, in the next 2 days, it had already totally died down. So the whole thing is kind of in the rear view already. But, it's going to be maybe anticlimactic. I don't think it would be if we ever do definitively know who the Zodiac Killer was. You know who I think it is, and I would be stunned if it was anybody else other than Don Cheney, with a little help from his friend named Arthur Lee Allen. And that leads me into the next little tidbit here. And this is, again, I'm mentioning this YouTube channel that's called Zodiac. We called him Mr. Allen, Arthur Lee Allen. And my research partner, Tony Dinelli, we're both, we could call these guys the kids, or the Zodiac kids. And they put up a third video, and I think they really jumped the shark on this third video, because these kids, they definitely, well, they're adults now, but they knew Arthur Lee Allen when they were little kids in around 1963. But, this third video they put up is really jumping the shark. And they talk about Arthur Lee Allen driving them near Gaviota Beach, and he left, and he, for a while he left them in the car, and he came back with blood on them. I mean, who's ever driving these so-called kids, or the people behind this channel? I think it could be Graysmith, who knows? And they're making another play for Arthur Lee Allen. Yeah, I think Allen was involved, but I don't believe their story about them being at Gaviota Beach and Allen getting back in the car with blood on him. I think if he was going to go kill 2 people on the beach, he wouldn't have taken a bunch of young kids with him. So they're getting it's getting a little strange. I mean, the first 2 videos were interesting, and they had some video of Arthur Lee Allen, which, by the way, if you look at that, it shows how big Arthur Lee Allen was in '63. It's an actual video film, and he's so wide around his butt area and around his waist. He's huge, and that's '63. I mean, that's good time before Lake Herman Road and definitely Blue Rock Springs or Berryessa crimes, and that really hurts Allen as being the attacker. It really does, because he looks huge if you look at that video in one of their videos. I think it's the second one they put up. But anyway, wanted to read this next comment here. And this is from Matt Rishton. It said, I mentioned last year that Cheney's untimely exit from the Air Force could be significant in terms of giving him an axe to grind. Glad Tony agrees. It would be so cool to get access to his service records or someone who served with him and discover what the reason was. Of course, Matt's correct. He did point out the pass rate for the program that Don Cheney was in when he was in the Air Force. And that's something that I am working with Tony on as well, that Tony pointed out that how unlikely it would be just to do 2 years training as an Air Force navigator, because there's so much that goes into that training to get that training and just, get out of the military. This wasn't just like boot camp and then some regular service. Like my dad was in the Marines, but it was just a 2-year program. But when you do that for something that Cheney did, which was specifically training to be a navigator in the Air Force, that's not a training you would do and then just decide to leave unless something happened. And that's kind of what we suspect. So I'm definitely working on getting his records, which aren't easy. You think it would be easy. It's really not. With COVID going on, you have to write to the archives and all this stuff. But that's definitely something I want to do, and then I'm going to get that out soon. But I know I kind of rambled here. It's kind of a little more conversational episode of the Zodcast. But anyway, be on the lookout for that interview with Ned on the Zodiac Killer channel and the next Zodcast coming out soon. Thanks for watching. Oh, and if you haven't done so already, please hit the like button and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss the next episode. Thanks. Have a great week.